You found yourself in the three keys to the better relationships, three keys to better relationships. And the intro is brief. Everything about this class is brief. It's only an hour, and we're going to try to like talk about relationships. Are you kidding me? So everything will be rapid fire style, like we were Gen Alpha or I don't know what. Three keys to better relationship. Why? Because in order for our brains to learn things efficiently, we have to chunk them. We have to chunk them somehow. This is big, like right now in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's super popular right now. And one of the things that people are figuring out is that there's this whole bevy. Is that the right term? There's this whole bevy of techniques. There's a whole bunch, a cornucopia of techniques. And the people who seem to learn and adapt those best are the ones who have figured out systematic flows for how to import that knowledge into their body. It's one thing to have all this stuff, right? And we've got a lot of stuff. Most of it good, but we've learned a ton of stuff that we like to share. And a lot of the folks on this call have learned a ton of stuff. And then the trick is, how do we make that stuff manifest when we need it the most? When we need it the most, right? And I imagine, like put up an emoji if you want, because I can actually see those. But I imagine you may have figured out that relationships are complex. True, false, devil emoji, something along those lines, right? And one of the areas of complexity is that in that intimacy, the very nature of intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability makes it easy for us to get triggered. Then when we're in the triggered state, my experience has been, and the science that I learned about it says, it's very hard to access all of the brilliant, abstract, amazing knowledge you have about what one should do and how to take a longer exhale and what did the philosophers say about such all that shit goes out the window, and all we have is like whatever sort of is fastest or most ingrained. I often make the analogy to martial arts, just like I said with that jujitsu thing, because this is the same thing that they teach in self-defense, that if you are actually threatened, the more complex the thing you're going to try to pull off, the less likely it's going to be to succeed, right? So you have to have these simple motor memories sort of ingrained in there. So same thing when we come to relationships, and this is the idea behind three keys to better relationships. This is a free talk, and there's going to be a ton in here that then you could take and spin off. This is also the intro to a paid course that starts next Thursday. It will have a similar format, be a little bit longer of a meeting. But the idea of that course as well is that's called Conscious Relationship Essentials. And the idea is boil it down to like, what's the essential nature of it? And then you can build off of that all you want, but what's the pith of that? So that's what we are here about today. Marmar, anything on that?
It's fun to be, coming out again, just in this space of vulnerability, coming out. We have been together in partnership for 14 years now, which is amazing to consider. And we both have been deep in our studies about relationship practice and yoga of connection and intimacy and exercises and building muscle memories in ways of regarding each other. And we have taught at various times of our connection, and we went kind of a period where we weren't necessarily bringing this forward, but we are this year have been re-inspired and reignited by wanting to contribute to the village in this specific way. And that's to say that we're not perfect at this, and we're constantly learning and refining our own ideas and understandings of these things. But I feel really excited to stand with you in this community today with these three keys, because we feel I feel specifically that to create habit around these three aspects of relationship can make a really big difference in the health of a dyad and just in personal relationship to yourself and how you relate to others, even in your own mind, which can, and how we orient to others. And I really like to think about these keys as ways to reorient ourselves when we're in states where our orientation is dysregulated or we feel disoriented because of something that's arising in relationship, that these become anchors to support reorientation towards life-giving energies, which is one of the blessings of relationship. We need each other. We're mammals. We need relations. And it can be, again, activating and vulnerable when something feels off in relationship or internally in the relationship. And so I, again, am passionate to continue contributing in the village with how we can keep training these keys. And I do want to say that these methods are lifetime methods of development. It's not like you're going to get it perfectly and they're like, oh, this is locked in and forever, I've got this thing there. They're yogas. They're meant to be practice. And so I encourage, as we're listening and exploring these things, to take them on as a practice, and also make that new frames and orientations can really make massive adjustments. And we're hoping that today you get at least one aha that can really support an open orientation for how you regard the people that you love the most and that you want to have clean relations with.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maria.
Yeah.
And if you see us looking away, I was looking away on my phone because I needed to give someone the key to get into this Zoom meeting. So we may be doing that a bit as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I love the terminology orientation and then disorientation, right? Because that's what it feels like when we get those triggers, is we can become disoriented, whether we know it or not. But there's that feeling of like, some of us have said this before, like, oh, I wasn't myself once we finally, and we've come out of disorientation. So it's a great segue. We didn't even plan that segue because the orientation really is the first key. So let me type this in our chat box. Okay, key number 1 is called unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard. So you could take this, and this one really does come first, although Maria and I had a debate about whether this should be first right before class. Sign up for the free class if you'd like to see the ongoing debate. But for me, I'll say that, for me, this one comes first because it is the orientation. So if you, have any of you ever studied some of that great compassionate communication stuff? Like nonviolent communication is the big one. There's some other methods out there. That's the one I studied before, right? And what's neat, and also a bummer, is that some people have found you can be in relationship and have your partner go like, okay, I just want to share an observation with you. Oh, keyword observation. You must be doing nonviolent communication. Got it. When you told me that the order that I had worked so hard to make for class was wrong, I felt, and this is just my feeling, that you were channeling your mother right then.
Oh.
And then people can get, okay, so that was not the correct use of nonviolent communication, but we'll use these little words, observation, feelings. So I'd like to request that you not be such a B word for the rest of the night. And it's really ridiculous once you come out of disorientation to see how we use these. And so I bring that up because as a communication coach, one of the complaints I hear a lot is that people say like, oh yeah, I studied that NVC stuff and it's just so manipulative. And I'm like, whoa, who have you been doing? Like, as stated, that's exactly the opposite of the point. The whole thing is to be non-manipulative. That's what it means by non-violence, that you're not trying to like push the person to get them to do what you want or think the way you want. You're trying to share what's alive for you, which assumes that you are going to reciprocally share what's alive for them.
Mm.
And the whole idea of refining this, like, oh, she comes, I don't know I'm going to make up some demand. She comes to me and like, you never give me enough hugs or something like that. She hasn't said that one recently. So it's a good hypothetical. You never give me enough hugs. And if I were to take that at face value, that's not really what's alive for her. I would want to delve into like, whoa, you need more physical affection from me.
Mm.
And sometimes if you do that, if you mirror that well, the person's whole heart will open in a second. They'll go from like, you're not enough to, oh, I need more. And it's totally different. So there's this totally different tone. Or you might, skillfully translate, oh, wow, are you asking, let me see if I can boil this down because of the way my brain works. Like, if I were to give you 3 more hugs a day, would that meet your needs? And they might go like, no, you're so analytical. I need you to be present with me. And then, oh shit, we got there. You need me to be It's not about the quantity of hugs. It's about the quality of presence. Got it. So we're getting to and it's a science of like getting to what's alive for the person, sharing what's alive. Okay. Bring it back in, Faj. The whole thing about unconditional regard is when we use these tools in these ways that feel manipulative or just plain don't work, we're usually using them without that sense of unconditional positive regard. They come across with this sense of like, well, I can love you when you up the level of hugs in this contract. Or I can love me when I finally do 10 push-ups every morning. Or any of these standards where we've taken happiness and love and we hold it for ransom until you meet the requirements of some egoic structure. And this is the opposite of the orientation that we are proposing is the one you might want in a relationship. I'll say like 2 more keywords and then I'll ping pong it over to you. I'm on a roll. I just resigned from my post as a pastor, but I'm feeling the Holy Spirit and I got to preach to y'all. Okay, my other keywords. This is, you may have heard the term earned secure attachment. Earned secure attachment, right? Like, so cool if you could come across it. This is what we're talking about though. What is earned secure attachment? Well, like if you were lucky enough to be in the percentage of the population that came out of your family of origin with secure attachment, what you felt was that regardless of what you did, someone was present and loving toward you. Whatever else the heck happened, someone was present and loving toward you. When we develop that in adult relationships with a partner, but can also be your therapist, can also be your BFF, and ideally, don't put all the weight of earned secure attachment on your partner alone. Like maybe give your therapist a little bit and your BFF a little. In meditation, we learn to develop that with ourselves. This self-compassion stuff, right? So it's the whole thing. It's the whole darn thing is unconditional positive regard. Okay, Marmar?
I love these words, unconditional positive regard. And when Faj brought that as one of the keys that he wanted to present, what immediately came to mind in how we have been holding that and what has been really, I feel, has supported generating an energy cocoon around our relationship that feels unfuckwithable in a very like palpable way, is that we regard our relationship as a body of shared energy, and that there is actually a regard for consciousness that is transcendent of our own individual identity needs and ways that we shadow crash. And so there's some way that inside of like, that we're coming together as 2 individuals, and through union and collaboration and communication, there's something else here that's holy. There's the regard for the divine in this other person. And when I can regard them as a divine being and how I orient to them, my orientation changes even if I'm upset, even if I'm if I'm having a shadow crash, even if I'm having some painful memories come up, even if I'm having needs and I want more and I'm not getting what I want, there's a rest before moving from that place towards this person. I can regard them as someone, as like like, whoa, you're a being who I have compassion for, who's on an individual journey. You're part of my divine matrix and of love, and we're in this collaborative field together, and that field of energy is really potent, and how I show up for the field of energy matters. And that is an immediate shift for me in terms of again, how I approach the navigating aspects that come up in the relationship. I know that like within relationships, as we navigate the world, sometimes we'll have all of these like identity shells or habits or strategies to just survive the world, and hats that we put on. And in our most intimate relationships, some of the power of those identity structures start to edge into disillusion. We encounter someone who's going to be, through the work of relationship, potentially dissolving parts of who they hold themselves to be in order to maneuver, and leaning into the care of the field of the relationship. We're reading a really great book right now called In Each Other's Care, and it really speaks into this field of energy of unconditional positive regard, of like, wow, me and this human, we're in each other's care right now. We are both edging up against the shells of who we believe we are and have to be in the world in order to find something deeper through our connection that is a remembrance of the divine that we are. And it becomes this third energy body. And I speak to that because that's in a lot of some of the kind of like deeper energetic studies of union. They talk about this third body that comes together in relationship, and how to relate to this person. So one of the things is, it's just like, yeah, just, I'm never going to talk shit about my partner. I'm never going to speak in a way about my partner to others that would demean them, diminish them, who they are, and their connection to the divine. I might need to discharge things that are like not working, or find ways to speak about things that are alive if there's anger and emotion and feeling, and find creative ways to do that. But there's this way of holding my partner and what's here as precious and sacred with again, unconditional positive regard, that then for me has created new methods of strategies of how I deal with the things that are the most painful that come alive. Because again, it's coming alive in response to the intimacy that we're bumping up against, the parts of ourselves that are then slowly dissolving in each other's presence. And how do we create a field of mutual care and empathy and profound and dignity, to consistently hold up the dignity of this other human being and their divine connection and my divine connection, and the divine connection within us, within what's happening together.
So that is a great segue
Yeah.
to your 2 free tips. This is the model, right? When you give an introductory class, here's the free tips, but it's actually it's educational, right? You know, because our brain, it helps to sort these things. Key number 1, unconditional positive regard. Just put a pin in it, right? Whatever in our sermons you got out of that, that's in key number 1. And then your 2 free tips. Number 1 was, don't threaten the stability of the relationship when things get rough. Like when you're triggered, or when you are having a fight or something like that. And this I really was reminded of in Stan Tatkin's book, what's that one? Your Brain on Love. And he, as a couples therapist, one of his main things is, you don't, as a conflict resolution technique, take "we should get a divorce" out of your repertoire, right? That's not a conflict resolution technique. And it's because we want unconditional, as Maria said, so to put these in bold, we want unconditional regard for ourselves, for our partner, and for the relationship. And of course, the relationship might change shape. This is not to say that there's no place for assessment. But usually when we want to go to, well, fine, then I can, find hugs somewhere else. Um, that's not the time when that should come out of our mouth, because it becomes very damaging. This is maybe the last note on this, and then we've got technique number two. The last note is like this. A lot of this work comes from the Gottman Institute, where they have found, like, mathematically, that the instances of turning toward your partner versus turning away with such words like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, if that comes up as a conflict resolution tool in your brain, you should know, like, that's just eroding the foundation of the relationship, right? And so maybe come up with better conflict resolution tools. But just in terms of, like, again, my martial arts brain, like, we've been doing a drill in class lately where it's like multiple attackers are coming at you, and you just have to train yourself not to turn your back to them. And you're triggered because, like, people are come punching at you from all, and just got to remember, like, okay, your only rule is always keep them in your sight. And these are types of things we can train, like in relationship. Okay, I'm gonna be triggered, things are gonna suck for a while, and just don't try to use I'm leaving as a conflict resolution tool. This is free tip number one, just to boil them down to, like, what we can do on a Thursday evening. And then this one gets 2 free tips, which Maria already alluded to. The second free tip is don't belittle your partner. Don't belittle your partner. And this, some tantric teachers, Nakchang Rinpoche was pointed out, like, in that tradition, your partner is actually a reflection of you. And so he's like, it's the stupidest thing in the world to belittle them because you're belittling yourself. So you don't get to be like Rodney Dangerfield or something, or some of these 50s comics where they're like, oh, take my wife, please. Or we could say, in yogic terminology, just divest yourself from speaking the language of the Rakshasas. So don't try to learn a different language than demon talk, which is criticize, condemn, and complain. Now, what are you going to do instead? Well, that comes later in the class. But these are couples, so we have this just radiant orientation of regard. And within that, as far as tips that we can do, okay, just see where we might want to threaten the relationship as a conflict resolution tool. Just try to take that off the list. And then 2, see I guess I could have studied these positive since it's positive regard, but I was trying to boil it down. Work to, what's the opposite of criticize, condemn, and complain?
Speak in ways, it's like this, like, not in divisive ways, but in ways that turn towards. So curiosity, seeking to understand, seeking to extend. And this kind of goes into the next chapter. It's kind of perfect, but like suspend for a moment how you think it's supposed to be, and who they are that's not providing that, and it's that seek to extend of, like, what's going on for them, and that's what's correct about what they're doing, or like what's like how are they moving in a way that's also trying to meet basic needs. Even if they're in tunnel vision too, it's just like, what can we do to expand out of tunnel vision for the moment? And that, again, it's like when we get shut down, Faj was saying this earlier, it's like, oh, we lose contact with our frontal cortex and we go into, like, you and fight language. And if we can do anything, get curious, take a deep breath to open the tunnel vision and then regard them again. It's unconditional positive regard. And it does, for me, leaning into that as just a mode starts to bring on my frontal cortex again, which can start to access, like, like the curiosity of what's deeper, where it could go next. Like, what are we both looking for? what do we both want right now? That's the same. And so these are seeking to understand and speaking to this person as if they're someone who you want to, like, offer care for. And it's different than like careful. It's not this like edging on eggshells and self, like silencing. That's a different thing that's going on. But like regarding the words that you speak as arrows that penetrate the field, and how do you want to bring words forward that contribute nutrients and clarity, and ask questions rather than cut at someone's dignity.
Mm. So we're centering on fundamental dignity, fundamental dignity, and we can evoke that in each other. There's this principle that, yes, very good segue again to the next one, which is if we want to get unconditional positive regard even more detailed and practicable, yes, I think that's the right word. It's learning the subtle art of finding the place in ourselves when conflict comes up, of being able to go, I can see how that makes sense to you. That makes perfect sense from over there, right? And we can still hold the space for it. That makes no sense to me. But we're staying out of, this is the not belittling, not condemning. We're staying out of the stance of like, you're just nuts, right? That's an anti-empathetic stance, and it will erode these wonderful secure attachment qualities that we want to cultivate. So let's go on to numero 2. Will you press return?
Boom!
Typological yoga. Number 2. That's a mouthful, but I couldn't think of anything better to call it.
I like typological yoga, the yoga of typology. And so the word typology, there's a lot of different typologies out there, and we're not going to cover them in this, the next 15 minutes, but to get into as a key for having better relationships, right, is really understanding this kind of person and this kind of person. And there's like the typologies that exist with different brain types based on different kind of hormonal influences. That's a typology. There's typologies based on the Enneagram and like basic personality structures that are different, that respond to different things, that want different things, that don't like certain things. And how to just really, rather than trying to change, it's like really getting to know, what type are you? What kind of human are you? And rather than the attempt is like, how can I mold you into the thing that is exactly the thing I've been longing for? So it's like, it's that applied curiosity and wonder of like, wow, I'm learning so much about difference. This other person is so different than me. And I'm going to riddle off a few more types, and then you're going to talk about why typology is needed for our species. So other typologies that get into is like different kinds of love languages. We've heard about, this is starting to become more of the cultural norm of like, oh, I need touch, but he really likes acts of service, and understanding what kinds of ways we actually understand love and are receiving love. Also, the typologies that have been extremely valuable for us is working with attachment styles, like what are the family constellation structures that we come from that have then built certain kinds of nervous systems to navigate conflict, and how do we come up with ways to know that that's what's going on rather than taking everything personally or freaking out. It can help settle things down. We're like, oh, that's a behavior that's part of that typology, and ultimately that's rooted in an aspiration for protection. And how can we create up new pathways of intimacy, knowing that those things happen in under stress? So when we know our person's typology, we know where they go when they're under duress. And when we're in each other's care and have unconditional positive regard for our beloved, we can then start to bring ourselves forward to not go immediately into reactivity and just take a beat, be like, oh yeah, that's part of their typology. Oh, we're learning our types together. Oh, we're creating shared language and understanding and mutuality about each other's types and being able to make deeper requests from informed places. And so I think with typology, it's like doing that work together to really know the types so that it becomes part of the dance of learning about yourself and each other and bringing health and information to the relationship that can be drawn from in moments of like, oh, overwhelm. It's like, oh, is that thing that you do, that we do during these like specific states of duress? My other favorite typology recently is the 5 personality patterns, which are all like energy structures that are based on specific kind of root traumas that we've experienced that then set up specific personality strategies that then play out when we're in pattern, again, when we're under duress. There's also like Ayurvedic types, like doshas, like different kind of body systems and ways that energy runs through the body, introvert, outrovert, other kinds of types. And like, again, the fun and the pleasure of getting to know someone and being in relationship with someone who is a different type than you are it brings the gifts and challenges because they're different. They think differently. They want differently. They're interested in different things. They want more of something that you want less of, and there's this game, and this is why it's part of the yoga. It's like when we're doing typological yoga, now I'm in union with someone who is not me. There's the me and the not me. We were just playing as like, in divine reflection. Oh, you're divine. But now divine is through you in a completely like different way as divine is through me. And this becomes this beautiful interplay of learning and growth that can only happen when we're exposed to differences. And so how do we regard differences in others, not from a problem orientation of like, oh, they're different in these ways and that's a problem. It's like, oh, they're different in these ways, and that is generating this energy dynamic between us that is full of energy. What do we do with the energy that's available in this dynamic because of the polarity that's present based on our differences?
Love it. So in praise of typology, Homo sapiens down throughout the millennia have to have numerous typologies because diversity helps our early tribal bands to survive. So one basic one is that there are night owls and morning larks. And one of the reasons for that is that there's always going to be somebody awake to be able to check out what's going on. So if you get some weird structure that says like, oh, if you're a good person, you wake up early in the morning, then like, what about all the artists whose best work happens at 3 a.m.? Like, it's more fun to explore what their type can do than to try to put that type into a little box. And as Mario was kind of saying, one of the things that gets weird in longer term relationships is that like in dating, the differences are what are so cool. Like, oh, wow, I never thought that way. Oh, you're so different. And then when the dating drugs wear off from your brain, the endogenous ones, I don't know what kind of other drugs you're taking exogenously, but when the internal dating hormones wear off, we start to look at their differences as problems, right? Like, oh, wow, she never wants to go out. And it's like, well, yeah, you loved dating an extrovert or an introvert 6 months ago, right? Why is it something you need to change now, and vice versa? So learning to take the stance of going like, wow, they're weird, and that's great. And, we can learn to help people move through their growing edges, but often that's not our job, number one. And number two, often they're going to move through those growing edges better with a lot of support. Like if we take that research on secure attachment in early childhood, what helps kids grow and explore is having a safe home base to come back to from their adventures. So if you make home base all about like, well, your typology is wrong and you got to learn, that actually doesn't speed growth. It slows it down. Okay, the free tip is the advanced golden rule. The advanced golden rule. Okay, so some of us know the regular golden rule, but not the non-advanced golden rule for all of us normies, which was do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or something like that, right? So, I like people to make me a cup of coffee. So I make my partner a cup of coffee, of course. And the basic one is great because it's a fundamental way of humanizing others. Like back in these old religious traditions, they needed to teach us how to humanize other people and not dehumanize them. It comes back to that unconditional regard. And so it's like, hey, they're a person, right? Yeah, just like you. Okay, so treat them like you think a human should be treated. And we take the template as ourselves. The advanced golden rule, though, is that I treat my partner as I think they want to be treated, which there's a subtle difference. So the example we were talking about earlier is if I get a little dysregulated or if I have a stressful day, I want to be left alone. Oh God, do I love being left alone if I'm stressed out. I mean, you can like slide snacks under the door. That's pretty acceptable. Or you can send me a link like, I think you'd like this movie. Like, oh, those are great. Text me. Ah, that's wonderful. But don't knock, okay, please. Definitely don't call. I mean, I won't answer, but don't knock on the door. And then once I'm regulated, I'm ready to connect again. All right, we've proven this. Okay, I've grown. Okay, but if Maria comes home, and I've made this mistake before, so this is coming from experience. She's had a stressful day, and I want to be polite to her. I want to give her what a person needs when they've had a stressful day. And so politely, lovingly, I will disappear out of her fucking space so that she can self-regulate.
Right.
That's the nicest thing I can do. But her style, we have found, is like hugs and listening. And so if I have the advanced love language, I can understand. Like, and it takes a minute to understand. You know, it's not just, oh, well, she's a woman, so she's going to want hug. No, dude, don't try that. You made a big mistake there, you know. But because of who this unique weirdo is, like she needs her particular brand of weirdo loving. And so in partnership, but this is all kind of relationships with your best friend or whatever, like, oh, do they like it when you like order their latte ahead of time for them? Or do they like to be the agent who gets to walk up to the counter and be like, actually, I don't want that classic syrup today. I want something else. Like, and fine tuning that. These are the ways that we're bringing that unconditional regard into the specificity of it's how do you want to be loved? Or sometimes they don't want to be loved that way, but you know they like need, this is sort of advanced. I know you need this. Okay, be careful with that. But in long-term relationship, like we do, like, babe, I'm gonna draw you a bath. I don't want to take a bath. Would you please take a bath for me? Okay. You know, and it's like because you know their code book by that time, what they need. So that's your free tip, advanced golden rule.
Yeah, and I love how this also starts to have, again, it brings back wonder and open orientation to our partner's differences so that we're delighting in the sameness, which is like that we're children of the divine, and we're learning from the differences and like upholding the differences as not problems. We're not having a problem orientation about our differences. We're just getting to regard the differences with delight and curiosity and interest, and taking an active interest in what makes our beloved tick. Not that like we're always going to be able to avoid ticking our partner off, you know, like we stumble around each other all the time, like, you know, bumping up against each other's armor and boundaries and places where we're not totally regulated. Now that will happen, but with greater compassion and understanding of each other's differences, those moments become easier to navigate. Those because there's a well of care offered that becomes a reservoir of all of these moments of positive interaction, that when those moments get stumbled, we can immediately drop into be like, oh, there was one of our differences again, got it. And we can draw we can access regulation faster and co-regulation faster and stability faster within the relationship. Again, because there's a reservoir that we're feeding consistently through practice and through this yoga of care.
All right, number 3, are you ready?
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right, compassionate communication. This is, again, Faj was talking a little bit about the trials and triumphs of NVC, where there are some, understandable sort of allergies to the ways that perhaps some of the methods of compassionate communication have been utilized from maybe an orientation that didn't have the whole picture, and so it can be understanding like that these tools can be kind of clunky sometimes. However, I believe it's worth the practice and getting through the awkward, clunky moments in using compassionate communication within partnership, because the benefits far outweigh the awkwardness at learning the skills. And so compassionate communication, again, it's getting back into this place of, we do have differences, and our partner cannot read our mind. And if we're putting onto them the projection of they should know how I am because I know how I am, then we're not actually upholding them with that unconditional positive regard and the care of their differences. We're withholding then all of this profound alchemical fodder for the relationship and fuel for the relationship to be in greater flow. And so learning skills around compassionate communication and some really basic tools, which again, some of this stuff is absolutely my favorite stuff to talk about, and we're going to definitely get into it deeper in the coursework to come, because they are real methods and yogas, and that I think really deserve kind of the regular muscle development over years. But the aim is to be able to use the power of translating what's going on in here and in our nervous system, because our partner's tracking us anyway. They probably know what's going on, but they might be reading little subtle cues in the energy field. And so to give the gift of dispelling the miasm, right? Because the brain will sometimes go into worst case scenario, or they might be like tracking at different things. And so to bring forward things in transparency just creates more ease and flow. It starts to close loops. And there are all kinds of moments where compassionate communication are needed. Like most of the time, if we're in like a regulated state and green light go, we can play, there's just like talk, we're jamming and stuff. But it's in those moments we get into a jam. We're like, oh shit, it just got spicy. Our nervous systems just got a little heated. Oh, all of the shell of who we believe we are just got like bumped up against. And it's in these moments that there's all of this energy, and it can turn very quickly into frontal cortex down, animal body fight out, up and out. And it's usually in these moments we're trying to preserve or protect something really important to us. And so learning the skills of compassionate communication to navigate moments of duress or potential conflict, or like riding into the yellow light where things are just a little bit more spicy in the field, is an act of devotion to keeping the bridge of alignment and of mutual understanding paved. And so that's what I have to riff off immediately. What do you want to share about that?
Well, we'll go right into our free tip, because the clock keeps on ticking.
Sure.
So as Maria said, that was the whole sales pitch for it. It's great. And then how do you train it to be able to have it on hand when you need it, right? This is, I think, my big sort of mission in the world is to let people know, like, if you're trying to do compassionate communication when things get hard, you've set yourself up for failure. You have to train when you're not already in a stressed out state, or you'll never be able to bring these online when you are in a stressed out state. And so your last free tip of the day is the OFUN protocol. The O Fun protocol. So just briefly, and you got to go to the paid course if you want to learn more, or just get Dr. Rosenberg's book or like his free 9 hours on YouTube. And it's great. There's lots of resources out there. But in classic nonviolent communication model, it's observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And I always imagine that spells oftener, OFNR, like you should speak this way oftener than not. Okay, I mean, whatever. But Maria and I have a practice we call the praise protocol. And today I'm calling it the O Fun protocol because it's just the O, the F, and the N. O, F, and N, which is, it's this way of practicing. So when you do NVC, I got to hold myself back from going too deep because we're running out of time. But when you do NVC, often, like when there's a conflict, we would want to get down out of my projections into an observation, right? When you slammed the door earlier, right? Like that's pretty much an observation. There might be a little emotional tone, but that's different than, remember when you got all pissed off and you like left in a storm? Like that's a bunch of projections versus, oh, observation. The door was slammed. Many decibels emitted from that door. I felt scared, right? I share a feeling. Instead of what we often do, I felt like you were blah, 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 and offer our projection or our valuation or something like that. We offer a need. I need my home to be quieter than that or something like that. I'm making this up on the fly. And then often we'll have a request. Would you be willing to close the door more softly, even if we just had an argument? Or something like that. And this is just a great way to like start a conversation without having to start a fencing match with our words. Okay, but then if there's no conflict going on, often you don't need to make a request. If there's something you want to praise or uphold, and if you know about early childhood education or how humans learn, this is also reinforcing the things you want. So it's things like, hey, remember when you made dinner last night? Like, I felt so relaxed because I really needed, just somebody else to step in and hold me up for a minute. I didn't have anything left. And like it seemed like you were just supporting me. I needed support. Thank you. And I did an observation, a feeling, and a need. And it's so much different. It's deeper than if I were to go, hey, you're a nice person. She doesn't know it's about dinner. She doesn't, like, we thrive when we know what we did, how it made the other person feel, and then specifically, like, did we meet their needs? Did we actually get in there? Hey, remember when I had a stressful day and you like left me alone, but you texted me about this movie I could watch and you slid snacks under the door? I felt so well taken care of. That might be a bit of an assessment, but it's okay. We'll let it slide. I felt so taken care of because I needed space and sovereignty. So this is your free tip. You may have to research further, but just to give you a little ping, to start thinking about, again, with your friends, with intimate partners for sure, but just input as much fun protocol as you can. And what it does is it starts to train the brain to, when someone is like, remember when you left the seat up after going to the bathroom? Like it trains the brain to speak in that way, not you're such a slob, just like all men before you, and I feel betrayed. And like, just to be offering these projections, you go, remember when you left the seat up? Yeah, that felt really cold on my backside because nobody leaves the seat up in this house. And I felt sad and shocked and alarmed because I needed to go to the bathroom with comfort. Would you be willing to put the seat down after you go? Like it trains us. And then people go like, oh yeah, sure, of course. And if not, come to the advanced class. But we did 3 keys and 4 free tips. 3 keys and 4 free tips, because the first one was so big it needed 2. So that is our presentation for tonight. Let's shift over to a couple minutes of Q&A. We got about 7 minutes for this, and you will, you're in charge of your camera. So I'm going to shift to gallery view and that will all come up on the recording. So you're in charge. If you don't want to be on the recording, please go ahead and turn yourself off. But other than that, raise your cyber hand if you have a question, and that'll put you in the queue, and we'll try to get to you. Okay, Daryl, what do you say?
Well, just gratitude. You are sharing with us the radiation of your love that you have for each other. And you're modeling it in all sorts of dimensions. And you're doing it humbly too, saying you're still in the lesson just like all of us are. And I'm grateful for that. The way you present, we really need to hear this right now as a whole species, because it's easy to get caught in going the opposite way. And you're giving us some very pragmatic things that we can do daily in all that you're teaching us. And I look forward, everything has a heuristic quality about you guys. It's always expansive, and the lesson is on, and you're sharing it as fast as you're learning it with us, that we need to learn it too. And we're all in this together. And I would just want to say it that way. One of the things I will share with you and the whole group, though, in meditation and prayer, it came to me that I woke up and I thought, I wonder how much we keep using in our language. And you've already addressed major change in the way we use our language to each other, particularly when one or the other is caught in whatever is trapping at the moment. And that's where the unconditional love comes through. And so I was going to just share this with the whole group and with you. In meditation, something came to me that how much are we using the word I, and you, blame you for what I don't want to face in myself. I see you as the problem, not me. And then so I looked up in the etymology of language, and I found at etymology.com that since 1980, it's suddenly, everything was pretty steady on the language use. It would be we, us, together, that kind of thing. It was pretty steady in balance to all the I, you, me, my. And then since 1980, it's taken off geometrically. The graph shows not only maybe tenfold, but 15, 20-fold of the use of those words in attacking each other, not loving each other.
So when they said it was the me generation, they weren't lying.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to make sure people get their questions answered, but it's such a crucial point that we can use our communication to invite rather than to divide. So really beautiful point. Okay, anything else? We can't go too deep, but specifics.
Jima, Karina.
All right, hi, and I ditto what Daryl offered. So I observe that my heart is feeling fueled and outrageously positively regarded by your offerings, because I have a deep need for the evolutionary step that I'm about to take as a 75-year-old grandmother. And so I'm coming out of a period of deep grief for the loss of my sister. And as I go through this positive unconditional regard, it's challenging me to positively regard her death, her passage through the death gate. It's challenging me to be conscious of my choice of words, and that I don't project my automatic blame on somebody else for taking her away. And before I can get to praise of my relationship with her, which was 18 years before she got married, I really needed to dive deep into the language of grief. And I needed to go through all of these steps, tipping points. I needed to tip my teeter-totter over from I lost this to what did our family lose? And now I'm at the point where her husband of 53 years, what did he lose? So this really brought me back to empathy. It brought me back to unpacking my boxes of photographs with her, to thinking, well, I had 18 years, but she had 53 years with him. And what would his boxes be like? What will his closets bring back to him.
Mm.
And so I have a positive regard for that. So my praise, I don't have an inquiry so much as I just wanted to pose that grief requires positive regard,
Mm.
and that grief requires a languaging, and it requires a sensibility to, do we grieve alone? Do we grieve in the bush? Do we go to the ocean? Do we go into the closets? Do we write? How do we grieve? What is a co-creative expression of this multi-leveled grief? And we're going through that globally. So it's a big time for that. So my praise is that I made it here. I'm here. And I'm loving the both of you. It's the first time I've met the both of you in the same space. I've often met you, Farzan, in Maria's space there as a non in the physical form. So I'm so happy to meet you. Thank you so much for being in this form and being with Maria.
Thanks
And,
for coming here tonight. It's so great
Yeah.
to play with you. Before folks run, let me put the advertisement in the chat box, and then I see Norbu's hand, and we'll take Norbu's question last. So this is our upcoming class. If you want to go deeper in some of these with us, that's where to go. Starts next week. It's reasonably priced, and it is also only an hour and a half on Thursday evenings. And so that should be pretty simple.
It's 3 weeks in July.
3 weeks. So the idea was like boil it down to the essentials, see how deeply we can train on some pith points. So feel free to come. And as was stated, this is probably really the technology our world needs. You know, whether you're learning the way we like to say it, or whether you go to the Hendrixes and Tatkin and the Gottmans and Nakchang Rinpoche, and there's resources, but this is one of them. So we hope you'll come. Okay, Norbu.
Hey, thank you for doing this. I think the question I have is, well, an observation is that in my own experience, these techniques and techniques like them, I can manage them in like 95% of my life, but then in 5% or in the parts of my life and relationship where my trauma is most available, it's so challenging. And the like my, how do you say, ability to respond it's I feel challenged there. And so I'm working in a lot of arenas, but I am just curious if you could comment briefly on how that plays into your view of things.
I think from my side, how I have held the parts of me that have been that feel kind of more sublimated than what some of these tools, what I can access in moments. For me, those moments have required me to do some real nervous system recalibration and healing. That it's all been like deep subconscious nervous system healing, which does connect to kind of typology from my perspective, but it, for me personally, I've had to go into advanced holding with a practitioner to get support for the parts of my nervous system that are provocable beyond what I can contain in relationships where my partner is also vulnerable in those places. I needed to get support outside of my primary relationship to repattern at the deepest level of those systems so that I could come with more resource and openness and access to the scope of my own being, so that 95% slowly becomes 96%, and slowly becomes 97%, and slowly becomes more manageable in those moments. But that's the best answer I have now.
And then in this frame, it's kind of like, that's like, how do we get that unconditional regard for self all the way in to where, you know, like I have this vision of like our clay soil out in front here in Nevada County. And it's like, how do you get the water down into the aquifer there? And that's, as we were taught, a lot of the time, these things that come up and they like rupture, like those are places where empathy hasn't gotten to yet. And so that's the, you know, like, is it the rote answer is like a therapist. It's like, well, that means a lot of freaking things, but it could be, and sometimes people, you just have to keep throwing darts at the wall. You know, sometimes people figure it out once they went and did somatic experiencing, and other times it was holotropic breath work, and the others was like, nope, I had to do iboga therapy in Mexico or something. And for the FCC or whoever, we do not condone or blah, blah, blah. But it's, you know, it's kind of like, how do we crack that to get into the aquifer, to get that unconditional regard to where it's necessary? I'm very influenced right now by, I'm kind of like studying up on internal family systems, and some of the stories in there about like, you know, like, oh, you know, that sometimes even the therapeutic techniques can rouse these protectors that you didn't know were there, and they just take over, and we're like dissociated for a minute. And, you know, so it's a pain in the ass. And, you know, where this type of work, like coming to free class on Thursday, one of the things that's beautiful about that is that we get to sit in an affirming container and sort of soak in positive regard that way. But then we also can't mistake that, as I have personally, for the techniques that actually maybe getting that down to where it's needed to like unfuck a particular pattern. So, yeah. Well, folks, you have been divine. Thank you for your attention and your questions. More Q&A if you come to the paid course, obviously. The video of this will be up shortly in case you want to review. And we got to go eat pizza now as our after class grounding ritual. So please be well in all that you do.
We love you. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see some of you next week on Thursday.
Thank you so much. Thank you both.